At some point, most of us have stood in a store, or more likely, sat at checkout on a website, looking at a pair of sneakers that cost more than we were genuinely comfortable spending, and we did the thing. We justified it. Better materials. Better construction. This brand is different. This one is actually worth it. But that shoe you just paid $180 for? It left the factory costing the brand exactly $22. The $400 pair, somewhere around $35 to $40. And both of them, in many cases, were made in the same building, by the same workforce, under the same roof as the $60 pair you'd never be caught wearing. The company at the center of that story is called Poo Chen Group. They're publicly listed on the Taiwan Stock Exchange. Their clients, Nike, Adidas, Reebok, Asics, New Balance, Timberland, are named in their annual reports. None of this is secret. It's just never been put in front of you clearly enough to connect the dots. That's what this video is. And by the end of it, you'll have a much better answer to the question you were already asking at that checkout screen. Before we get into the brands specifically, let's make sure the factory picture is accurate, because this is where most people misunderstand the argument, and I don't want that to happen here. Poo Chen Group is not one building. It's a manufacturing conglomerate with production facilities across Vietnam, Indonesia, China, and Bangladesh. So when we talk about Nike and Adidas shoes being made in the same factory, what we mean more precisely is this: the same parent company, the same contractor network, often the same physical complex, and in many documented cases, the same workers. The person stitching a $60 budget shoe in the morning is often the same person stitching a $400 limited release after lunch, not a similar person in a similar factory in a similar country. The same person, on the same floor, using the same equipment. That's the part the brands are very careful to never show you in their campaign videos. Now let's look at 3 specific brands, with actual numbers, actual company names, and actual documented history. Because I can tell you all of this directly, without softening it, because there's no Nike rep in my ear, and no affiliate link in the description. We're looking at the raw data. Case File 1. Nike. Nike is the world's biggest sneaker company, but here's what they actually are: a marketing company that licenses a swoosh. They don't make sneakers, they make stories. The physical work, every sole cut, every upper stitched, every lace inserted, is handled entirely by independent contract manufacturers. Nike doesn't own a single production facility anywhere on the planet. The largest of those manufacturers, by volume, is a company called Yuan Industrial Holdings, the listed subsidiary of Poo Chen Group. At its peak, Yuan was responsible for roughly 14% of Nike's entire global footwear output, billions of pairs over the decades. And that same company simultaneously produces for Adidas, Asics, New Balance, Timberland, Skechers, and Reebok, sometimes in adjacent wings of the same production complex. Now let's get specific. The Air Force One, Nike's best-selling silhouette in history. The standard white-on-white version retails today at $115. The factory gate cost, what Nike actually pays before that shoe goes anywhere near a shelf, is approximately $16 per unit. That's been reported across multiple trade publications and supply chain analyses. Nike has never meaningfully disputed it, because there's nothing to dispute. Nike also produces Air Force One collaborations with designers, artists, cultural figures, retailing at $180 to $600 or more. And here's where I want to be precise, because the honest version of this argument is actually more damaging than the exaggerated one. Not every collaboration is literally the same shoe in a different box. Some involve genuine material upgrades, a higher grade leather, a different insole, details that a careful eye would notice, and that do cost something extra to produce. That's real. But those differences account for maybe $15 to $20 in additional production cost. They do not account for the gap between $115 and $450. That gap isn't filled with better leather. Call it what it actually is: the hype tax. You're not paying for what's inside the shoe. You're paying for what's printed on the box and who signed off on the say, colorway. What's filling the rest of that gap we'll get to shortly, because it's more deliberate than most people realize. Case File 2. Adidas and the Yeezy situation. This is the one case in sneaker history where a brand accidentally ran the experiment for us, and the results were cleaner than anything a journalist could have designed. Adidas manufactured Yeezy 350 V2S at their contract facilities for approximately $15 to $18 per pair at peak production. Retail price, $220. Secondary market, $300 to $500, sometimes higher. The markup from factory floor to resale buyer was roughly 25 times the production cost on a bad day. Then came the split with Ye in late 2022. Adidas terminated the partnership and found itself sitting on approximately $1.3 billion in finished Yeezy inventory. Shoes already manufactured, already quality checked, factory cost already paid. Warehouses full of a product with no story attached to it anymore. What they did next is the most honest thing the sneaker industry has ever accidentally shown us. They released the shoes, exact same physical product, same factories, same materials, without the Yeezy name, just Adidas. The secondary market prices dropped significantly, not because anything changed about the shoe, because everything changed about the story around it. The physical object was never the product. The narrative surrounding the object was always the product. Adidas proved it themselves, in public, in one of the most expensive supply chain crises in sneaker history. So we have Nike on one end, a company that doesn't manufacture anything but controls the story so completely it can charge $450 for a $16 shoe. We have Adidas in the middle, a company that accidentally proved its own product's value was narrative, not physical, the moment that narrative was removed. Two different strategies. Same conclusion. The third case is the one most people don't see coming, because it involves the brand that markets itself as the honest one. Case File 3. The Heritage Trap. New Balance has built a significant part of its identity around domestic manufacturing. The 990 series, made in Massachusetts and Maine, retails at $185 to $200, and the American-made claim is legitimate. The domestic labor cost is real. The quality control is genuinely different. The 990 is one of the rare cases in this industry where a meaningful portion of the price premium actually traces back to what's inside the shoe. That's worth saying, clearly and fairly. But here's what the advertising leaves out. The majority of New Balance's catalog, the 574, the 500 series, the children's range, most of what fills the shelves at every sporting goods store in the country, runs through the same Tier 1 Asian contractor network used by Nike and Adidas. Same countries, often the same facilities. You think you're buying Maine craftsmanship. You're actually buying the marketing of Maine craftsmanship, applied to a shoe built in the same factory network as brand's New Balance has spent years implicitly positioning itself against. This is what the industry calls a halo effect. The premium product at the top of the line radiates perceived value downward through the entire catalog. You pick up a $75 New Balance sneaker at a Dick's Sporting Goods, and somewhere in the back of your mind is an image of a craftsman in Massachusetts. That image was placed there deliberately. Your specific shoe never came within 5,000 miles of Massachusetts. Again, this isn't unique to New Balance. It's how brand architecture works across the industry. The 990 is real, but the 990 is also a very expensive piece of marketing for a catalog that, in most cases, is built the same way as everyone else's. Knowing that's the structure doesn't mean you can't buy the $75 pair. It means you're buying it with your eyes open. Now, this is the part most channels skip, and it's the part that makes the difference between a hit piece and an honest verdict. Let's give these brands their strongest argument, because they have won. Nike's R&D budget in 2023 was approximately $1.1 billion. That's in their public filings, and it pays for genuinely real things. Flyknit technology, the seamless engineered knit upper that changed how the entire industry builds shoes, came from that budget. React Foam, Zoom X, air units that have been refined across decades of genuine engineering work. These are measurable performance improvements, and they cost real money to develop. Add the endorsement deals. LeBron James alone is approximately $32 million a year. The full Jumpman roster runs into the hundreds of millions. That cost is distributed across the product line in some form. It's a real business expense. Add logistics, returns, IP protection, retail infrastructure across dozens of countries, consumer protection compliance. None of it is free. So the gap between a $22 factory cost and a $115 retail price is not pure profit margin. There are legitimate costs in that gap. Anyone who tells you otherwise is giving you a simpler story than the truth supports. Here's where it stops working in their favor. Think of it this way. If you bought a $150 Nike, the innovation inside it, the years of labs, engineers, and materials science, cost the company less than a latte at Starbucks, about $1.20 per shoe. That's what you get when you take Nike's reported $1.1 billion R&D budget and divide it across 900 million pairs sold. Now, that's a simplified calculation. R&D investment doesn't distribute evenly, and performance shoes carry more of it than lifestyle ones, so be generous. Triple it. You're still looking at roughly $3.50 to $4 in research cost per unit. Add the athlete deals. Add the logistics. Do the most favorable version of the math. You still cannot close the gap between a documented factory cost and a $400 retail price through expenses alone. At some point in that climb, the cost justification ends. And what takes over is something far more calculated. Most people watching this have had at least one version of this experience. A shoe drops. You set an alarm. You're on the site the moment it goes live, and within 90 seconds, it's gone. Or the size you need was never available to begin with. And then you watch the StockX price climb past double retail, while the brand's Instagram is nothing but celebration posts and sold-out notifications. That feeling, the frustration, the sense that you missed something genuinely rare, is not a side effect of the release strategy. It is the release strategy. Nike doesn't accidentally produce fewer pairs of a hyped Jordan colorway than the market demands. That's a deliberate production decision made months in advance. When a shoe sells out in 45 seconds, every person who didn't get one becomes an unpaid marketing asset. They post about it. They talk about it. They watch the resale price climb and tell someone else. Nike generates cultural conversation about a product it sold 0 units of to those specific people, and it costs them nothing. The resale market, which at its peak was a multi-billion-dollar ecosystem built almost entirely on Nike and Jordan brand, is not a problem the company is trying to solve. It's a free media channel they've never had to pay for. The StockX listing at $400, when retail was $180, is an advertisement. The reseller took the risk. Nike got the credibility. The factory made 200,000 pairs at $28 each. Every single one sold. At retail, or through inflated secondary channels. The scarcity was manufactured. The demand was real. That gap between the two is where the actual business lives. This is where most people get the pricing model wrong. They assume the price reflects what the shoe cost to build, or design, or market. At the upper end of the market, the price is primarily a signal. It communicates scarcity, desirability, and cultural membership. What's actually inside the shoe is almost beside the point. It was always beside the point. So what do you actually do with this next time you're about to spend real money? First, separate the purchase reason. If you're buying for athletic performance, running, training, anything where the shoe is doing technical work, the gap between a $120 and a $200 shoe from a reputable brand is often real. The engineering differences are measurable. Once you cross $250 for pure performance, check what independent reviewers are saying, not sponsored athletes. Running Warehouse, Doctors of Running, believe in the run. These outlets test shoes without brand money involved. Their read on what's actually inside is more reliable than any campaign. Second, if you're buying for style, own it. There's nothing wrong with spending money on a cultural object. People spend money on art, on music, on things that have no functional utility and are entirely about how they make you feel. A sneaker can absolutely be that. But make that decision consciously, knowing what you're actually paying for, not because a brand told you the shoe is rare or special or crafted with a level of care that has no relationship to a factory running 200,000 identical pairs on a production line. Third, before you look at the collaboration, look at the base model. In almost every case, the $115 version and the $300 version share the same core construction. If the base version would make you happy, everything above that price is the hype tax. Sometimes, paying the hype tax makes sense to you. Sometimes, it doesn't. But now you're making that call, knowing what it is, not what the brand told you it was. And if transparency genuinely matters to you as a deciding factor, On Running and Hoka publish more accessible breakdowns of their pricing philosophy and what's actually inside their shoes than almost any legacy brand. Their premiums are more traceable. That doesn't make them perfect. Makes them more honest to evaluate, which is more than most of this industry is willing to offer. The next time you're at checkout looking at a $400 sneaker, you're going to think about this video. Maybe you buy it anyway. Maybe you don't. Either way, you'll be making the call with a clearer picture than the brand gave you. That's the only thing this channel exists to do. If that's the kind of content you want more of, subscribe. It keeps this channel independent, and it helps the next verdict reach people who need it. The Sustainable Fashion Breakdown, Recycled Materials, Carbon Pledges, Green Packaging, is already up and linked right here. The numbers in that one are, if anything, more interesting than these.